My dear brothers and sisters, what a great joy to be with you for this wonderful celebration. We are so grateful to Cardinal Dolan for hosting us and for Tim Bush and the Napa Institute for organizing this wonderful expression of devotion and faith. It's a privilege to be here with Cardinal Marengo, my brother bishops, priests, fellow religious, and so many of you, my brothers and sisters, who've gathered for this wonderful celebration. In 1963, I was in Ireland, in the part of Ireland where the O'Malleys are from, at the very time when Pope Paul VI was crowned Supreme Pontiff, and when President John F. Kennedy, the first Irish Catholic President of the United States, was visiting Ireland. It was a grand celebration. The Vatican flag, the American flag, and the Irish tricolors were flying from every flagpole in the country. And in the village where I was staying, they organized a Te Deum in thanksgiving. The whole village assembled in the parish church, as they did in those days, the men on the St. Joseph side and the women on the Blessed Mother side. And after the prayers, the pastor and chief magistrate made speeches during which they proclaimed an amnesty for all of the prisoners in the local jail in honor of the Pope's coronation and the President's visit. We were told that when the church bells rang, that the doors of the jail would be opened and all the prisoners would be released. I was very impressed. Only afterwards did I learn that there had not been any prisoners in that jail since the Easter Uprising of 1916. But indeed, a very enterprising mayor sent the local constable out to round up a few of the town drunks, put them in prison, and indeed, there was an amnesty. The curé of Ars, as a seminarian, was saved also by a comic opera amnesty as well. In those days, seminarians were drafted into the army, and young St. John Vianney turned out to be a feckless soldier. He was separated from the other soldiers and so considered a deserter and was forced to go into hiding. But the marriage of Napoleon III to the Habsburg Archduchess was marked by an amnesty for draft dodgers and deserters, and so St. John Vianney could come out of hiding and return to the seminary. The real amnesty, the greatest amnesty of all, is the sacrifice that Christ, who paid our debt, who stepped in front of the bullet to save us. By his stripes we are healed. We were all under a sentence of death, but the amnesty of Calvary has spared us all. In every Eucharist, we relive the events of this amnesty. They are mediated to us through the priesthood of Jesus Christ, instituted as a sacrament so as to transmit the Eucharist to all places at all times. Jesus has kept his promise for 2,000 years and will keep it to the end of time. As believers, we strive to contemplate with ever new eyes the mystery of the incarnation of God. In Jesus of Nazareth, God became a man in order to reveal the Trinitarian mystery of divine love and to save humanity. The Eucharist attests to the fact that Jesus is with us forever and that he loves us more than we can imagine, offering us the forgiveness of reconciliation and communion of life with God. The Eucharist is the source of our life and our hope. The Russian Nobel Prize winner, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, says he recalls 3 episodes from his childhood that are ingrained in his memory. The first was being taunted mercilessly by other boys as he walked with his mother to the town's only remaining church. Another was having someone rip the cross that was hanging from his neck. And the third episode was a conversation that he had heard among the elders of his village who said, "Men have forgotten God." And that's why all of this is happening. All of the oppression, the hopelessness, the gulag, the torture chambers, the despair, it all is come about because people have forgotten God. Sometimes I think of Alzheimer's as a new metaphor. The world is full of people with spiritual amnesia. People who have forgotten God. And when we forget about God, it is very disorienting. We forget who we are, why we're here, what is our mission, who other people are. We forget what is truly important. Do this in memory of me, we hear in today's gospel. There are many less people in church than when I was a child. Many go to church looking for entertainment. Often we are like sick people who do not know enough to go to the doctor. Why go to the doctor? It's probably boring. It might be inconvenient, uncomfortable, or demand some change in my behavior. God forbid. The hell that Alexander Solzhenitsyn experienced in the horrors of the concentration camps of Siberia and the crisis of modern society is because people have forgotten God. Many people fail to come to church because of this spiritual amnesia. Either they've forgotten God or they've forgotten what the Mass is. I remember as a seminarian reading a very interesting interview that Flannery O'Connor gave. She talked about growing up in the South where only 2% of the population was Catholic. As a young girl, she invited a little Baptist girl to come to Mass with her on Sunday. Her little friend had never set foot in a Catholic church and went with great curiosity. After Mass, Flannery O'Connor was anxious to hear the little girl's reaction to the Catholic Church. "What did you think? What do you think?" she asked her. The girl said how impressed she was and went on to explain why. She said, "You Catholics must really have something very special. The sermon was so boring. The music was awful. The priest mumbled in a language that nobody could understand, and all those people were there. It's amazing. You Catholics must have something very special." What brought those Catholics to church every Sunday morning was the Eucharist. They were not there to be entertained or to listen to a barn-burning sermon or to attend a concert. They were there because of their faith, unwavering faith in the Eucharist, Jesus Christ present on our altars. In today's world of religious illiteracy and the secularization of the culture that undermine that faith, we have so many parents who send their children to CCD like soccer practice and yet don't take them to Mass. We're here today because we know that God has not forgotten us. He still loves us. As the scriptures say, even though a mother might be capable of forgetting her child, I shall never forget you. Your face is engraved on the palms of my hands. We are here today to say to the world that God has not forgotten us. God's cry is like the stirring lyrics of that song that says, "The only thing I ask of you is that you remember me as loving you." Do this in memory of me. Do what? take bread and say, "This is my body." Christ's love is present to feed us. Happy are we if, like those first Christians, we too can say that we recognize him in the breaking of the bread, that we do this in memory of him and of his love. If Mass is a chore, a burden, a boring exercise, the problem is perhaps that we have forgotten how to pray. If we have not first closed the chamber door to pray to our Father in secret, if we have not knelt next to our child's crib and taught that child to call God our Father, if each day of the week we have not punctuated it with time and space for God in prayer, then we will never be able to enter into the mystery, to be absorbed in the Eucharist. Only then will it make sense, and we will discover why the Eucharist is so amazing. We can admire the ingenuity of so many human inventions. Nowadays, when I visit a Catholic school and go in the classrooms and see those little children sitting in front of computer keyboards with smart boards and modern technology, I remember that when I was that age, we were learning the Palmer method and carefully dipping our pens into the inkwell. So many marvels of science and technology, so many new gadgets and inventions. The Eucharist is God's invention. It manifests the ingenuity of a wisdom that at the same time is the foolishness of love. The entire revelation of the work of salvation is astonishing, and the Eucharists constitute the pinnacle of that mystery, where in the simplest possible way, the fulfillment of the divine design has far surpassed any possible expectation, where we can see only bread and wine. We stand before the assertion of the presence of God. How can we fail to be astonished at the fact that the one who is God offers himself as food and drink to his very creatures? The one who is Lord places himself entirely at our disposition. He has died for us on the cross and is risen, and now he feeds us. Everything in the Eucharist is derived from love carried to the extreme. God's love is so inventive. He has devised a way to be close to us and to allow us to be united with him and with our fellow disciples who share the same loaf and the same cup. The Eucharist erases the boundaries that separate us from God and from one another. Pope St. Paul VI once wrote, "The Eucharist has been instituted to make us brothers and sisters, so that instead of being strangers, divided, and indifferent to one another, we might be united, equals, friends. The Eucharist has been given to us so that instead of a selfish, apathetic crowd made up of hostile individuals, we might become a people, a true people with one heart and one soul." For 2,000 years, the Church exists because of Jesus' promises. The Church has sprung up around the breaking of the bread, around the Eucharist. Even before the New Testament was written down, the Church gathered around the altar to celebrate Mass. During my 41 years as a bishop, it's been my joy and privilege to confirm thousands of young people. My message to them is always, look at the Eucharist. God is making a gift of himself. And the only way our life will find meaning and fulfillment is if we make a gift of ourselves to God and to others. That is our mission. We are a Eucharistic people. We find our true identity when we are gathered around the altar. On the altar, our God becomes a gift, a life-giving gift. As a sacrificial meal, the Eucharist communicates the love that has inspired the sacrifice, a love that has spared nothing in order to secure the happiness of others. At the first Eucharist, Jesus gives his disciples the new commandment: love one another as he has loved us. How does Jesus love us? Jesus loves us first when we're still in sin. He doesn't wait for us to love him and then reciprocate. And he tells us to love one another as he loves us. His love for us is the measuring stick. We must learn to love first, to give first, to forgive first. And in the Eucharist is where we will find the strength to do just that. I once had a very dear priest friend, Father Morty Fox, from Washington, D.C. He was a very talented, zealous priest with a magic personality that mesmerized everybody, even the worst enemies of religion. When Father Fox would come into a room, the lights would go up and the bells would ring. He was a joy to be with. One morning, something very remarkable happened. I was at my desk when I was bishop in the West Indies. A call came in saying that Father Fox had died suddenly of a heart attack. I was very saddened. Afterwards, I went to the post office to pick up the mail. And to my great surprise, among the junk mail and the bills and the ads, there was a letter from Father Fox waiting for me. I was stunned. My friend, who never wrote except at Christmas, was now sending me a letter from the grave, as it were. I trembled as I opened the letter. And as I read it, I could see his smile. I could hear his laughter. Suddenly he was alive and present once more. That night in my holy hour, reflecting on this strange incident, it occurred to me that that letter is like the Eucharist, a sign of love and friendship, a desire to communicate, to be present. But in Jesus' case, it was planned, it was intentional. And the letter that he sends us is himself, the Word made flesh, made Eucharist. And God has been preparing that letter from all eternity. The first reading from today's Mass from the book of Genesis with the story of Melchizedek, the king of Salem, who offers bread and wine, already points to the mystery of the Eucharist. Likewise, in the Old Testament, we read about the manna, that mysterious bread that comes down from heaven to feed God's people in the desert. The Scriptures also speak to us about the Paschal meal by which God's people celebrated their liberation from bondage and the tyranny of the Pharaoh. We read how the blood of the Lamb was smeared on the doorposts of the children of Israel and spared them from the vengeance of the exterminating angel. All of these things are signs that point to the greatest gift that Jesus gives us on the eve of his crucifixion. In 1917, a young Jewish philosopher named Edith Stein, later canonized as Saint Teresa Benedicta of the Cross, wandered into the cathedral in Frankfurt. And suddenly she saw a woman come in with her groceries and sit in a pew for a brief prayer and then leave. Edith Stein was struck by that intimate conversation the woman seemed to be having with God in the middle of her everyday errands. The observation was a powerful witness to Edith Stein, stirring a deep desire in her to have a similar relationship with God. She recalled many years later that this was something completely new to me, she said. People went to a synagogue or a Protestant church because they were going to go there for services. But here was someone interrupting her everyday shopping errands to come into the church as though she were there for intimate conversation. Edith Stein could never forget the lady with the shopping basket, who was not a tourist, who went into the church to admire the architecture or the works of art or the beautiful stained glass windows. The lady was there because her faith assured her that every Catholic church is a new meeting tent where the Eucharistic Lord is waiting for us to visit him and share with him our joys and our sufferings in intimate moments of adoration and thanksgiving. When I was bishop in the West Indies, we experienced a terrible hurricane, Hurricane Hugo, one of the worst in the history of our islands. We were 6 months without electricity, water, or phones. The public schools were closed for over 2 years. Almost all of our buildings were destroyed or damaged. After 24 hours of hiding from the fury of the storm, I left my shelter and began going around to the churches to retrieve the Blessed Sacrament. I'll never forget entering the Church of the Holy Family in Tutu on St. Thomas. The modern church was very open with decorative bricks, and I thought that would allow the winds to pass through and that the church would have survived. But it was a pile of rubble. When we finally were able to plow our way through all of that rubble, we got to the altar and discovered that the tabernacle and the altar were completely intact, and the sanctuary lamp standing still burning bright. I was overcome by emotion to see that in the midst of so much destruction and mayhem visited upon us by Hurricane Hugo, the Eucharistic Lord had not abandoned us. Every time I go into a church, the first thing I do is to look for that red lamp and feel the thrill in my heart when I see it, to know that Jesus is still Emmanuel, God with us. Today, in this magnificent Cathedral of St. Patrick, it is for us the meeting tent. Here we gather and recognize Jesus in the breaking of the bread and rejoice that God's people will accompany the Blessed Sacrament through the streets of this great metropolis, carrying the Blessed Sacrament as God's people carried the Ark of the Covenant, which contained the tablets of the law and some of the manna with which God fed his people in the desert. The Eucharist continues to feed us on our journey. And so today, from the depths of our heart, let us pray like Francis did. When St. Francis would see the steeple of a church, he would kneel and kiss the ground and pray, "We adore thee, O Christ, and we bless thee here and in all your churches of the whole world, because by thy holy cross thou hast redeemed the world, and thou hast won for us the amnesty. O sacrament most holy, O sacrament divine, all praise and all thanksgiving be every moment thine."